Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
I'm doing fine, and I'm ready
Right.
and to go, and we're still in the casual mode.
Yes.
And one of these days, we'll get a full crew back again. But in the meantime, the news still keeps flowing in. And we've spotted a couple spots, not that we couldn't have found a lot more of danger spots in the world, nonsense that governments and others do, seeming to make things worse, all with the pretense that they're going to make things better, and makes us suspicious that government's on the wrong track. And when that question is asked by a politician, they do polling, about 80% of the Americans think wrong track. That's a famous question they always ask in political polling. Are they on the right track or the wrong track? Well, they usually say they're on the wrong track, but then again, we say, well, we think we know what you should do to get on the right track, but they don't seem to have enough interest. So that's our job, is to get this information out. And we do see bits and pieces that people do get upset and they get on the right track. So today, we want to talk about some foreign policy mixed in with some economic policy, because the first item I want to bring up, Daniel, is this U.S. to sell Taiwan 400 Boeing-made Harpoon anti-ship missiles. Boy, I guess they really need that. They must be getting ready to be attacked. But all we see, or at least I see, when I see things like that, it's just making things worse. It looks like, how do we get a war? How do we get a good war going on? What do we have to do? Because it just doesn't make any sense. And you know, yesterday, I think we mentioned that about the troops being over there. They added some 200 troops into Taiwan. So that doesn't sound like a lot of troops, but for what's going on over there, adding military troops there was a big deal. And now they're going with these harpoons. And Daniel, why don't you go ahead and give us an assessment of that? Because I have a question later on that I want to debate a little bit, but go ahead and let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that foreign policy goes on as it was, and the whole basis of U.S. foreign policy is having an enemy. It's not protecting the United States. It's not making us safer. It's not even making the world safer. The U.S. foreign policy is based on having enemies. And as we see the war in Ukraine winding down, a war that many experts knew could not be won, in which many people said it was a proxy war between the US and Russia. I think you mentioned that early on yourself in a column. So as that war winds down, and it will, because it can't be won, you're seeing Washington ramp up conflict with China, using Taiwan the exact same way they use Ukraine. It's a proxy war between the US and China, and they're using Taiwan as a scapegoat, as the Ukraine in the situation. Now, you'd think that Ukrainians would be smart enough to see what's happening, to see what's coming, but I guess they're excited about all of these goodies, and they also make plenty of money, I'm sure, themselves off of the relationship of the U.S. military-industrial complex. But it just goes to show that nothing ever changes in Washington. You go from enemy to enemy. The only thing that changes, I guess, is you're going to progressively bigger enemies. This is not Iraq that you're kicking around. This is a nuclear armed China. This is nuclear armed Russia. So the stakes are higher, and they're rolling the dice higher and higher, and it's increasingly dangerous, and it doesn't serve the American people's interests.
Well, the subject I wanted to talk about a little bit is, how does this financing work? You know, the headline says U.S. to sell Taiwan 400 Boeing-made Harpoon anti-ship missiles. But I think it's misleading, because it's not like, you know, a country calls up and talks to Boeing, hey, do you have some of these things? Could you send them over there? We'll send you $1.7 billion. And that to me seems so strange. It was approved in 2020 by the Congress to go through with this transaction. And it's considered to, the Pentagon announced a $1.7 billion contract in April, but they didn't say exactly what it was, but it sort of fits the category of dealing with this. So inevitably, I would suggest that maybe when they say we sell, I think the American taxpayer is in big time for this kind of stuff, even though Taiwan is not a poverty-ridden country. But I think the money thing is a big deal, because that is what is challenging us right now, because it is coming out of our pockets and the taxpayers' pockets, and because our foreign policy now is in disarray. And we'll talk about Saudi Arabia in a little bit, and that will indicate that it seems to be falling apart, which has a lot of economic significance. But I just wonder, if people realize when they read these things, but most of the average people aren't too worried about, oh, a sale, that's good, we're spending money, we're going to make a profit on it, rather than saying we're more likely to have war and we're going broke doing those kind of deals.
Yeah, I mean, even if Taiwan didn't drive up to the drive-up window at the Pentagon and order these missiles, even in the best, quote unquote, best case scenario, it is the U.S. taxpayer who subsidized the research and development, the building, the creation of the Harpoon missile. I mean, all of the costs are socialized. We pay all the costs, and all of the profits are privatized by Boeing and Raytheon and all of the other companies. That's why it's a massive scam. So certainly the U.S. taxpayer, in one way or the other, is all in for this. And again, the question is, how is this serving the U.S.? I mean, not even how is it serving the U.S. national interest, but what is the U.S. national interest? What is our strategy? What should be our goal in a world that's changing? Nobody is even. I mean, there are a lot of people that had dumb answers to big questions, and we could talk about Brzezinski and others. But why isn't anyone even asking? Why can't the people in the State Department and Pentagon even craft a kind of long-term big strategy instead of Russia bad, China bad, build missiles? That's basically it. I mean, it's on autopilot, Dr. Paul. There's just no thinking going on, and it doesn't serve the American interest at all.
McCarthy was over there, Nancy Pelosi was over there, and we have this acceleration of the conflict there. So I wonder what just happened. Well, the little article that we've looking at on anti-war gives us a bit of insight to this. It says news of the Harpoon seals comes as tensions between the U.S. and China are soaring over Taiwan. Beijing just recently concluded a major fire drills around the island. That was dramatic, of course, that were a direct response to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy meeting with Taiwanese president. But during that time, on some of the news clip, he was pretty emphatic. Don't sweat it. We're going to take care of you. And then they wonder where the escalation comes. But unfortunately, what I think is happening in America is, with the propaganda machines, really oiled up, I think most people would say, well, we have to stop the Chinese. They're stealing all our secrets and they spy on us continuously. And of course, we don't do any of that, and why would they want to spy on us? We're perfect. So I think this is, people have to put it together. We seem to poke them all the time, and we sending troops, and we send our leadership over there. And the big thing here, Daniel, is we praise it when a couple of Democrats and Republicans get together and there's a little bipartisanship, true cooperation. But here, once again, the leader, when it was a Democrat and when it's a leader, it's a Republican, they rush to Taiwan and start poking it, and it's all part of this obsession with China.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all part of the obsession. It just goes on and on. I think left alone, Taiwan and China would find a way to get along. They would trade better. And here's another example, and we'll talk about it in a minute about what's happening in the Middle East. But this is another example how when the U.S. gets involved in a region, it only sows discord. It only sows hatred and violence. It's not a force for good. I hate to say it because I love my country, but the government is not a force for good. The government keeps trying to keep China and Taiwan at each other's throats because it's profitable for them, and it's profitable for U.S. industry. I think the world is changing, and we'll talk about it in the next segment. But before we do, I do want to shout out to our sponsor, this month, and that is American Financing. It's an American-owned company. It's an American-owned mortgage lender. It's a family company. They've been endorsed by Sean Hannity, by Glenn Beck, by the late Rush Limbaugh. So they're well known. They've been in business for 20 years. They operate in all 50 states. If you have a look at their Google reviews, you'll see that the customers are very happy. Their employees are salary-based rather than commission-based, which means they have all the incentive in the world to find the right solution for you for your home mortgage issues. Their goal is to save you money, and they have many ways of doing that. So you can even end up debt-free if you call them. So call their salary-based consultants today and get started on your road to financial freedom. Tell the Ron Paul Liberty Report sent you. The number to call is 888-976-5050, and we will have a link in the description to American Financing so you can explore whether they can help you. Now, Dr. Paul, we're going to move on now to the Syria, and this is really a big deal, I think, Dr. Paul. The meeting between the Saudi foreign minister and President Assad of Syria on Syrian territory. It's a momentous event. They have not met since 2011. They've not had such a high-level meeting, so it's very significant, Dr. Paul. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, this caught my attention too, because I agree. I think this is serious. And because I see the mixture of economic policy and foreign policy coming together. And we were granted a great benefit by the wealth that we did have after World War II and the military power. And we, worked it out that the dollar became the reserve currency of the world. And then there was this agreement that's been going on quite a while. And that is that the Saudis will be taken care of. They do not have to worry a word about if you get in a war with Israel or whatever, we're going to take care of you. Saudis will provide what you need. So we made that promise to them, and they promised they'd use the dollar. That looks to me like this is coming apart. I mean, the major countries of the world now, China and Russia, are starting to use other than the dollar. At the same time, where are the chants? So where is Obama when the warmongers need him? Assad has to go. But you know what? After looking at this and looking at the current set of activities right now, I said it looks like Assad is going to stay, and this is something, and it's moving rather quickly. But who knows what will happen? But it to me could very well be a time bomb, because I can't see the major leaders of the deep state all of a sudden guiding the Republicans and Democrats away from this policy of interventionism. And they say, oh, yeah, you guys have a little bit of a good idea, but you're such extremists, you just want to go all the way. You just don't want to fight a war, this kind of stuff. So I think that this could explode. I wish we could do more to sort of try to neutralize and say, why are you in such a hurry? What's your big rush? We'll defend this country. I mean, this whole idea that we have to do it, saying that, talking for them, people like these libertarians and constitutionalists, they're not willing to defend their country. Of course, one thing is, we'll be ready to defend our country if he would just help us defend liberty.
Yeah. Well, I think the real big, we've talked about this before, Dr. Paul, but the big backstory on this whole thing is the role that China's played in the Middle East. And we're seeing over and over. And you think China's role in making peace in the Middle East, which is increasing daily, would be an embarrassment to Washington, would be a black eye. I mean, the Chinese are the bad guys. And here they are going over to the Middle East. Not only now, we're seeing rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. That war it looks like it's about to be over. And as we know, that was a tragic, horrible war, egged on by the United States, funded by Saudi Arabia, using US weapons to destroy Yemen, to cause so much poverty and misery in Yemen. That war is coming to a close, and that's because of Chinese mediation. And now we're seeing the re-entry of Syria into the region diplomatically, economically, as you say, and otherwise. And that was also facilitated by Chinese involvement. So the Chinese are going to the Middle East. They're getting involved. They're making peace. The Saudis are pulling away from the U.S. Biden sent the CIA chief over there to basically beg with the Saudis, stop making friends with people in the region. You're supposed to be on our team. And the Saudis just turned a cold shoulder. And now, in fact, I was reading in the Moon of Alabama website, which is always quite good today, that the next thing the Chinese have done is they have offered to facilitate Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. And one of the reasons they're so successful, Dr. Paul, in the Middle East is because they're viewed as what we should be, an honest broker. They don't have a dog in the fight, so they want to end the fight. And they're realizing, the countries in the region are realizing that it's a lot more profitable to be at peace and trade with people than to enrich the U.S. military-industrial complex and be at war with each other. So the Chinese facilitating an Israeli-Palestinian some sort of a peace agreement would be massive, and it also would be another massive black eye for the United States, because it shows that the U.S. simply not only is the world changing, but the U.S. can't fulfill the role that it has taken on for itself, which is to be the single hegemon. It can't run the world, and the rest of the world, I think, is seeing that. And the Middle East is where we're seeing it most dramatically.
Right. And I think you really touched on something important, is that we are now being excluded. If there's a couple countries getting together, how can we bring about peace? So we're the ones that it's becoming evidence that we're provoking wars. At the same time, they just sort of ignore the United States. And I think this is a sign of great weakness. But some of the people who disagree with us in our Congress decide, well, it is because we're weak. We won't stand up to them, and we need somebody with strength and drop the bombs on them if they start doing things. So it's a thing that I've always been fascinated with the group in foreign policy that is sort of between the arch warmongers and the libertarian non-interventionists, and that's the realists. And I want to be careful not to concede too much, but in a way, it seems like if the realists, the people saying, let's in a way say, let's be realistic about this. I mean, how far must we do that? How bold must we act? And if it's the only thing of insecurity that you have to do this to prove to the world and to the hawks in this country and the military-industrial complex that they're serious, that's one thing. So a little bit of realism that has been around, it might at least be one tiny step in the opposite direction that this administration seems to be going in.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully, U.S. foreign policy will change. I can't see this administration changing, but thankfully, we're coming, hopefully, to the end of the Biden administration. So we can at least be optimistic that maybe the next team will be a little bit better. So should we move on to our final topic today, Dr. Paul?
Right, and this is interesting too, because this seems to be imposed deliberate chaos to bring on a different world society, and that's talking about Germany. They had such a chance after the end of the Cold War. They even had they even actually talked to the Russians, and there was even the optimism to build a gas line where Germany needs fuel and energy, and the Russians want to sell it. And they put all this money into this pipeline, and it's still not proven who blew up the pipeline. But I think we have a pretty strong suspicion that it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't make any sense if we were involved in it. Just causes more chaos. So I think what is going on is none of this makes sense, but so many of our domestic things, look at our big cities just falling apart, and the judicial system falling apart. And you say, well, why would they do it? Why would they do it? And the only thing that it seems to get into my head is they're doing it on purpose. The chaos is, and then when you find out they actually say that, Marxism, it says that you can't come across with a perfect Marxist society if you don't get rid of all the vestiges of capitalism. But the whole thing is their enemy. Where we get into trouble there is the capitalism that they want to talk. They're not talking about free markets and sound money. They're talking about cronyism and pseudo-capitalism and warmongering and all that stuff. They're talking about corporatism that leads to fascism. So that is where the problem is. To come along here, Germany closes their nuclear power plants. And that's their biggest problem. And what's this going to do? It just doesn't make any sense unless somebody has it in their interest to cause chaos. And it looks like it's going to be rapidly moving on to Germany, and that means Europe, and that means more conflict among the nations.
It's just another example, Dr. Paul, of how destructive U.S. foreign policy is. Again, it's diabolical. It goes around the world just sowing, as you say, chaos, disorder, hatred, violence. You know, the blow up of the Nord Stream pipelines, I think we can pretty safely say that Seymour Hersh has it right, and the U.S. did blow it up. It's the elephant in the room. And why did it blow it up? Well, because it wanted to make sure that Germany never develops a trading relationship with Russia, because the people who run U.S. foreign policy would rather sell them liquefied natural gas at double the price and impoverish the German people in the process. So Germany signing on to all the sanctions against Russia, destroying relations with its potentially biggest trading partner, most lucrative, which would raise the living standards of the people in Germany. They, of course, have acted as the U.S. lapdog, and now the people are suffering. And as you point out, after blowing up the pipelines, after ending trade in natural gas and oil, now the only thing the Germans had left was nuclear power, and they went ahead and shot themselves in the head on that, closing their last nuclear power plant, switching off the lights, going home. I don't know if a couple of windmills are going to power Germany, formerly the industrial powerhouse of Europe. But what that means for the consumer is yet another increase. And we're looking at an article on Zero Hedge, and they say that electricity bills are going to spike up to 45%. And that is after the huge spike that came when Germany signed on to this foolish proxy war with Russia. So at what point, I wonder, Dr. Paul, at what point are the German people going to be fed up with their disgusting government, with the lapdog government, who doesn't look out for their own interests, who's blindly following a blind foreign policy by the Biden administration? You just have to wonder at what is the breaking point for Germany?
Scholz's administration, they were supposed to have a deadline last year, several months back, and some of his members of his cabinet decided maybe we shouldn't do this. Couldn't we just get a delay? So there's a few people getting a little nervous about it, but there's going to be a lot of people getting angry about it when the whole energy crisis gets 10 times worse, and they close down the cleanest and cheapest form of energy and make the things worse. But the temporary agreement that they worked out last year was it was to go until April 15th, which is passed, and that's why it's in the news right now, because they're still planning to do this. But I just can't see them waking up now. I mean, it's sort of locked in place, and they're just obsessed with this. And I guess when we feel a bit of frustration, which on occasion I do, I think that, well, the best I can do is try to find out what's really going on and try to pass the message out to get more people to come around and saying, well, that's Germany, let's forget about it. No, it's a small world these days, and the dollar was a big deal, and that big deal is coming unglued, and so is this whole energy thing, and so is the solution being offered up, which I have done so often, is distract you from the people, and don't you know, a good old war will help the economy. That nonsense. So I'm afraid we're moving rapidly in that direction. So Daniel, I want to keep us going, and so we can stay active and do our best to get this message out. You want to have a closing statement?
Absolutely. The last thing I wanted to mention on this, Dr. Paul, before I make the closing statement, is a great quote from Zero Hedge on this. And I think this encapsulates the entire thing, because as they point out, there is no climate crisis. There is no increase in ocean temperature. It's minuscule. The whole thing is a fantasy. And here's what Zero Hedge says: When the policies of the climate cult are examined with a clear head, it becomes obvious that saving the planet is not a primary concern. Rather, the purpose of the agenda is to increase power to government bureaucracies on a level not seen since the feudal empires of centuries past. And he says, get ready for the return of the peasant lifestyle. And I think that is a very good point. Before I finish out, though, I do want to mention our other sponsor for this month, and that is our good friends at 4patriots.com. We talk about energy. We've talked about how important it is to be able to have access to energy. We have a very shaky energy grid in the United States. One or two strikes, one or two energy power generation centers going out could cause lack of power for weeks, maybe months. One of the ways to protect against this potential inevitability, he would say, is the good folks at 4patriots.com, who've got a massive array of generators, of solar powered generators that can keep you going with the power out. You can power your medical devices, you can power your refrigerator, you can make sure your phones are up, and you can take it with you. That's the best part. It's portable, it's not hooked into your house. You take it with you where you go, solar generator. So go to 4patriots.com, the number 4patriots.com, put Ron in on your code and get 10% off of your first purchase. And of course, free shipping on all orders, $97 and above. Generators, food, you name it, 4patriots.com is in the business of helping us to take care of ourselves when the crisis hits. So go to 4patriots.com, and of course, the address and the link will be in the description below. And Dr. Paul, I would just finally close by reminding our viewers and apologizing again for the strange circumstances, unfortunately, that caused me to be away. But reminding our viewers that we do have a conference coming up. I just noted before the show started that we sold another ticket, and I'm always happy when I see a ticket sell, because I want to see everyone, I want to meet everyone, and I know, Dr. Paul, you feel the same way. So go ahead, and I will have a link below on how you can purchase your tickets to our Houston conference on June 3rd. It's at a beautiful hotel, the one we were at last year. Great food. It's not just going to throw you some ridiculous toast or something. It's good food, great speakers, and because of all of you out there, great company. So you'll see in the description how you can get your tickets to that event. Dr. Paul, over to you.
Very good. And I too want to thank our viewers for tuning into our program, and looking forward to meeting many of you at our conference. And for us, it's a necessity. I specifically come away more optimistic at the conferences, even though people will come up and thank me for giving them encouragement. So it's a mutual thing, but it's a tremendous benefit to us to encourage us to continue to do what we attempt to do by getting information out, and why we pursue the cause for peace and prosperity, which we consider so very important. Please return to the Liberty Report soon.